Hello guys and welcome to the new video of your Python and API development course. In this video, we will be learning about how an API works, what is an endpoint, and what are different HTTP methods that you will encounter while developing APIs. So first, how API works. You have seen and you know that basically what is an API and what it is used for. And you know that how it is working in real life with the examples that I have provided you previously. But now we will see that what actually happens when an API call is generated. So here I have taken an example so that you can understand it more precisely. The person or the application that is posing or that is generating the request is the client, and the application that is providing the data is the server. So, whenever a client generates a request, the request goes to the server validates the request, and if the request is valid, then the server responds with the data that the client wants. Now, here three things works. First is request, second is receive, and third is response. Request is whenever an API call is initiated by the client. Okay, and it is of a form of HTTP request. What is a HTTP request? HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And what are protocols? Protocols are set of or instruction of rules that are defined to do particular thing. So while when we talk about hypertext transfer protocol, these are the protocols or these are the set of instructions that are defined whenever you need to share data across the web. Okay, so first thing first happens is request. Whenever a client initiate or generates a request, then this request is generated in a HTTP form. Okay, we will discuss more about this further in the video. The server then receives this request. So the server receives the request, it validates the request, and if the request is valid, it sends a response to the client. And that's how an API path works. So now let's get into the example and see how it is happening. So the client or the beehive, it wants to make honey or it wants to make its application work. For that, it needs some data. Okay, so whenever we have an application, we need data to process so that our application can work. Similarly, the beehive, the application needs nectar to process and make honey out of it. So the client or the beehive knows that it can get the nectar or the data from the server or the flower. So it will generate or initiate a request to the flower or to other bees to get the nectar from the flower. So first thing is the generating of request. So it asks that, hey, we need more nectar to make our honey, or we need more data to make our app work. The bees in between, or this is the process where the validation of request takes place. So a flower in itself can supply with nectar, but the flower cannot supply with water, right? So this type of validation is required whenever we pose a API request or whenever we generate a API request. So the validation of data means that it is validating whether the server can process this request or whether what the client is asking can be provided by the server or not. Here it is nectar and the server is flower, so it can easily provide it. For example, say this bee might ask for honey directly. The server, the flower cannot provide honey, so it will say that this is an invalid request and it will not process the request further. Now, as it is asking for nectar, this is a valid request. It is a HTTP request and it is of type GET. We will discuss types of HTTP requests further in the video, but now just let's understand that the client wants something from the server, that is to get something, to get the data. So it is a GET type of request. So it's a HTTP request of GET type, and as it is valid, then a call to the server is made that there is a valid request for nectar. The server then responds with the nectar or responds with the data that the client wants, and it provides it the data. So this is how an API pathway works. It works in both the way, as it is a bridge. You can assume a bridge between two application, or you can assume a bridge between 2 points. Uh, a vehicle can go from here, a vehicle can come from here. It can work both ways. Similarly, an API works both ways, sending data from the client to the server, or from the client from one application to the another application, and similarly sending data from second application to the first application, or sending data from server to the client. That's how an API works. So API works in three three major steps. First is request, second is receive, and third is response. Request is generated by the client. The server receives the request, and if the request is valid, then server responds with the data that the client wants. Now, as I have told you that there is HTTP request used while we request the API. So, what are these endpoints? So, endpoints are nothing but they are a form of URL, or a type of a, you can say in layman language, is a link, a type of a link that we post request on, and if the request is valid, we get the data. For example, when we type https www.google.com, what we are doing is we are initiating or generating a request on www.google.com, which is a URL, to give us the data. Okay. Now let's see how these endpoint works and what is the purpose of endpoints. So you are the user, you have different servers, let's say web server 1, web server 2. These are connected to database. You know what is a database. Database are the storage units of the server where the data is being stored, and server can get the data and send the data to the database accordingly. So let's say you are a user, right? Now, if you want to access web server 1, and this is your whole web server or your web application. Now, if you want the data from web server 1, what will you do? Now, you have to generate a request, a HTTP request. But how will you know that you are generating the request to the web server 1? So you need to specify something, right? Here endpoints come into the play. What they do is they specify the location and the path of the application programming interface, or the API. So when I told you that APIs are programmed interfaces and they set a protocol for the communication between two programs, that's how they do it. They have unique endpoints that basically define that how the data and from where the data should be communicated. So let's say the first endpoint here, example endpoint, is https myserver1.com. So this is the base URL. This base URL specifies that whatever we are doing using this endpoint, it should be done using web server 1. Okay. Now, after that is the endpoint, or the path point, or the path. So it says user. So now this particular web server will recognize that, okay, it is asking me to work. It is asking the data from me while validating. Okay. And it will see that the path that it wants is users. So wherever the users are stored in the database, it will get it and it will provide to the user. Now, another point is, maybe there are some more things that you need to specify while providing an endpoint. Like here, it is providing that I need users, the first user in the web server 1. Okay. So now it will get the first user out of it and it will provide the response to the user. Now, let's say in my web application, I want to access web servers 2. So I need to change my base URL to myserver2.com. Now, as soon as I change the base URL to my server 2, whenever I initiate a request, it will automatically validate my request, and it will send this request to web server 2, because the API knows that now it needs to be handled by second web server. So here it is asking for first users In the user's path, it is asking for the first part or one part in the web server 2. So web server 2 will get the request or will validate the request, and then it will look into the database for the users and then one, and then it will provide with the response to the user. So that's how endpoints work. Now I want to show you a journal endpoint where you will be seeing that how these endpoints are basically working. So I have taken example of this YouTube video where we have a URL at the top of it. I will make it more clear for you all. Okay, so here is the URL. Let's see this URL. Okay, that we are getting here. Okay, so if you see this URL, if you see this URL, it is HTTPS, which defines that it is a hypertext transfer protocol, and this S is for secure. Okay, that is, this is a secure request and of type HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol. Now the base URL is www.youtube.com. After slash, we have the path, which is watch. So it will specify that I need to directly watch some video. Now you will see a question mark here. Okay. So whenever there is a question mark in a endpoint, it specifies that everything after this question mark is query parameters. Now, what are query parameters? So whenever we post a request using endpoint, we can also provide the server some data regarding what we want, what specifically we want. So the query parameters basically define the values of some parameters or some variables that can be processed by server and provide us the exact thing. For example, here after the question mark, it's V, which provides the video ID of the YouTube. And this is the video ID. Now you will see a end. So not only single query parameter, we can provide multiple query parameters to an endpoint. So here the YouTube URL, it has two query parameter. First is V and second is AB channel. AB channel corresponds to the name of the channel. So after equals to, it's written the name of the channel, which is 9AI. And the V corresponds to a video ID. So the value of video ID is this. So whenever I enter or I press enter for this endpoint, it will basically understand that what I want is I want to watch the YouTube video, which has the video ID provided in the link or in the URL, and it is of from the channel 9AI. One more thing I want to tell you here is one interesting thing I want to tell you here is that YouTube videos all have unique ID. So if you see, if even if I remove this query parameter, which is and AB channel, or I remove this query parameter, okay, I only provide it with single query parameter, you will see that it will automatically add another query parameter to it. Why?
Hey
Because
everyone.
it already know that what video it is, because all the videos are unique. Okay, if I say that whenever I am trying to generate a URL, see, it automatically added AB channel equals to 9A because every video has a unique ID in YouTube. So
Hey everyone, welcome to
so
module 3 of day 1.
even if I'm providing YouTube with only the video ID and not the channel name, it knows that which video I want to watch. Okay, so that was all about the endpoints. What are different types of HTTP requests in APIs? Firstly, let us understand that what are HTTP requests. So, as I already told you a bit, that HTTP requests are hypertext transfer protocol requests. So, whenever you are sharing a data over the web, there are some protocols defined for the communication of the data. These are HTTP protocols, which are hypertext transfer protocols. And you will generally see a S in every URL that you will be accessing. That is HTTPS. That corresponds to the hypertext transfer protocol secure. This secure stands for something that is it has a SSL certificate. I will not get in deep into it because it's generally the concept of your computer network parts. But what this SSL certificate signifies is that whenever I'm sending a data to another program, the data will not be uh, in journal text form or in journal human readable form. It will be encrypted, and this encrypted data will be provided to another application, and that application can then decrypt the data and process the data. So basically, this encryption and decryption of the data, it makes the process of transfer more secure. That's why we say HTTPS, that is hypertext transfer protocol, secure. So these requests are of type that whenever I generate a request on an endpoint, I need to specify that what type of request I want to generate. Like in the first part of the video, when we see that it was a GET request because the client wanted something from the server. So it was a GET request. Similarly, there are many more types of requests, but generally you will encounter these four type of requests, that is post, get, put, and delete. So what is CRUD? Crude. So crude, it is defined as crude operation. Crude operation is create, read, update, delete. Whenever an application is built, firstly it is checked that does it follow crude method, that is create, read, update, and delete. Whenever you try to build any project, keep in mind that you need to implement crude functionality, that is create, read, update, delete. These basic four personalities should be there in your application to make your application a complete application. For creating something, if a client wants to create something or it wants to pro- uh, make server tell server that it is creating something new, something, it is adding something new to the database, it is providing with some new data to the server to store it, it is a post request, right? If client wants to specify that I want to get something, I want to read something, or I want to just get data from the server, it is a get request. When a user wants to update a previously stored information in the server, it wants to update the data, that is a put request. It wants to put some data to already defined data in the server. It wants to update the data. So that type of request is put request. And if the client wants to delete some data from the server, then it's a delete request. So while working with APIs, the basically you will encounter majorly two requests, that is get and post request. Now let us understand the journal form of these get requests. So I have taken an example of the get request here. This is the endpoint. Okay, this is the endpoint. Get index.html. Now, whenever a get request is posed, index.html file is the URL. That is the endpoint. Okay, so it specifies that the method is get. This is the URL. Now, what is the version? So it's a HTTP request of 1.1 version. Now, every request, whenever you send a request, it will have a header and a body. Okay, what does header contains? So understand it by understanding what are headers. Whenever you have made a presentation in PowerPoint or you have made any document in Word file, you might have added header to it. Now this header, what it contains, it contains the page number, it generally contains date, it generally contains who is working on that page, it generally contains the heading of the page. So what a header has is, header has every bit of information or generalized information that can tell you the overview of the page. Similarly, in the HTTP requests or in the API, the header that are associated with an endpoint, they have the general information about that particular request, that what type of request it is, where the request has to be generated, that what is the URL of the client or the host, then what type of agent it is, and similarly many more information can be fed into the headers, and it can be packed and it can be sent with the API request to the server. The server identifies the header, it can extract data out of the header, and it can process this request on the way that what type of request it is. So it can basically understand that how it should be processed. Now, second part of HTTP request is its body. Now, this body is optional because whenever you are like asking server to get you something, or for reading purpose or for rendering purpose, you are just posing a get request, that you don't want any data to be stored in the server, you just want data from the server. So you don't need to supply the server with the body, and you don't need the body in the request, so you can leave it blank. But whenever you are posing some data, or you are requesting that I am providing you with this data, you are the client is requesting server that I am providing you with this data, you need to store this data. So now the client has to provide this data to the server. And how it will provide this data? It will provide this data in the body of the request. So in the get request, it has headers. Now, here are some example headers. Headers can have different type of values depending upon what type of request it is, and uh, on what program you are generating or initiating the request. Header changes as per that. Now, what generally journal header consists are host, that from where the request is coming, to identify the server, if even if the server wants to entertain this request or not. Similarly, it has the user agent, or what is the agent of the user. Agent is basically the particular version of the browser or of the system that the agent is using or the host is using. Then this here is as accept. So this request accepts text and HTML. It has the accept language, which is English US. It has char set, which is character set. Character set has different values, different character sets are there, and it is a character set. It has an encoding attached with it, which is UTF-8 encoding, and it has a connection which says that keep alive. So what it means is that as the server will have the request, it will keep alive the connection with the client uh, in the process of working or getting the data from the database and providing the response to the client again. It will keep the connections alive. Similarly, there is a post request. Post request is when you want the server to store something. Okay, here the post request, it has the HTTP that is post. It has the path to the source or the web server or the URL, which is register dao.jsp. It has the protocol or version of the protocol, which is HTTP 1.1. Now here it has request headers. Okay, you can understand it as I explained you, that host is from where the request is being generated. User agent is on what type of browser or the device the user has. It accepts text, XML, different types of images, and JPG also it can accept. It accepts the language, and there is encoding also. The character set and the encoding of the character set is provided. Keep alive 300. Okay, and this and the connection also keep alive. Now here is the body of the post request. Post request will always have a body associated with it, because post request means that you need to provide server with some data that the server needs to process and store in it. Here it is providing with the data that the user is Ravi and its password is Java. So now server can process this and store this data. Now I want you to understand that what this type of request and how they are basically used in your daily, or I would say whenever you are using in your daily purpose work, how you are using get and post request. So you all might be using ChatGPT a lot these days, right? Now I will show you that how basically ChatGPT is working on APIs, these HTTP requests. So I have what I have done is I have pressed Control Shift and I on my keyboard, which opens the developer tool for me, and I have went into this here in the network tab of this particular website. And this network tab, I have selected Fetch or XHR, which will provide me with all the endpoints that are being called and generated. Now, let's say I just came here. Okay, I just came to the ChatGPT site. So it will call too many endpoints for validation of my login ID, of validation that if I am true or not. But it will generate an endpoint request which is session. Now, what we want to look on it is this session request. Let's study this session request. Here, here you will see that whatever we have learned about the get request, it's generally similar to it's telling me that the request URL is this. Here we know that https chat.open.ai openai.com is the base URL, then slash API slash auth and session. These are the path to the resource that we want to get. Now the resource method is get because I just arrived here, so it is generating a session for me. So it is providing me with some information that can be presented me here. Okay. Now you will see the request header that is being sent to in this get request. You will see no payload here. What is a payload? Payload is the body of the request. You will see no payload here because it is of a get type of request. And this get request is basically what we say is we get the data from the server and we don't provide server with any such data that server needs to store. So there is no body here or the payload here. Now it has different type of request header like authority, what is the method, what is the path. See here it is defined that path is a slash API slash auth slash session, and what is the base URL, it's chat.openai.com. Similarly you have seen that what it accepts, what are the encoding, what is the language, this baggage and cookie. All these are different variables that this particular program is associating with this GET request and providing it to the ChatGPT server to let it know that I am posing the request. So ChatGPT, as it is a GET request, it will as the you can see here the 200 status code is for that the request is validated and processed. So it provides me with a response, and what is the response is this, that what is my it provides me with user, what is my ID, what is my name, what is my email, some images that needs to be shown, some logos that needs to be shown, when will my session expire, okay, what is my access token, and what type of auth is provided to me. So all this data is provided to me by the server, and this data is used to show me this dashboard. So what here happened is whenever we posted a get request on http chat dot openai.com slash API slash auth slash session, it generates a new session for me and it gives me back the response about my information and when will the session will be expired. Okay, now let's say this was a get request. Now let's take an example of a post request also. Now, in the post request, we need a body. Whenever I type that hi there, okay, whenever I will send this, you see a new conversation endpoint is called. Now, if I tell you that what this conversation endpoint has done and what type of this conversation endpoint is. Let me load it for you. Here it is. This is a post request. Okay. So this is a post request. 200, that means that my request was processed. Now you will see here the payload. When it was session, there was no payload. But now it's conversation, which is a post request. Here is payload. Payload is the body. Now in the body, it is providing the chat GPT server with many more information. But what we are looking for here is the information that we provided. That is, hi there. Now if I see inside the messages, you will see the role user, that is me. And if I see the content, what I have sent is, you will see that I have sent hi there. So that's how it is associated in the body of the request of the endpoint. And this will be processed by ChatGPT server that I have basically sent hi there to it and to ChatGPT, and it will process accordingly and send me the data. You will see now the this is the body. This is the structure of the body of this particular request or this particular post request. Now you can see the request header. It's almost same as that of the get request, except it has one extra variable in it, that is content length, which is 352. So it basically specified the server that the content that is coming in this post request has the length 352. So even if I by the way send a large content here, then it will process accordingly the length of the content and it will send that length to the server. So why this content length is specified here in the header, it's just because for the security purposes, that when I have sent the request in middle, maybe some data got manipulated and length of the content might have increased. So it will take only 352 length content from it, out of it. It's the headers are same as that I told you, that we define whenever we make a Word document, we define page numbers, dates, heading of the uh, particular page. Similarly, we have defined different types of thing here, and what is the type of the body, and it is written JSON or application. So whenever we request using APIs, we provide it JSON request or JSON body, uh, because what we try to build here is an application uh, which is of the form of JSON. So JSON is JavaScript object notation, and this is a particular type of notation which has a key and a value to it, a key and a value to it. So you will see here that all the data that is sent, it is of the form of JavaScript object notation JSON, that is a key and the value to the key, a key and a value to the key. So it is specified that this is a JSON type of data that I am providing to the ChatGPT server. So that was about post request and get request. Similarly, there were two more requests we saw there, that were put request and delete request. So these requests are generally not that much used. They are used, and that's why we will look into it. But what I want to make you understand is these requests are of similar type of post. The type of these requests is similar to that of the post request. What is different in them is whenever we are using put request, or whenever we are using put method for this particular API endpoint, we provide it with some query parameters in the URL to specify that which data needs to be updated, and we have to pass a particular body in the put request also, because we need to specify that what data needs to be updated. And whenever we are deleting the data, we also need to provide a body that what data that needs to be deleted. So guys, here in this video we have learned that how an API works, what is an endpoint. We have uh, gone through the structure of an endpoint, and then we have seen different types of HTTP requests, that is get, post, put, and delete. We have seen an example of post and get requests using the ChatGPT server. I hope you guys understand. See you guys in the next video.